So I was just on the startup jury, and I was watching all these poor guys just struggle with this clicker, just dreading what was going to happen to me up here. So far, it's cooperating. I'm here to speak to you today. Very excited to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart. I'd love to speak to you about competition and competitive dynamics. And the reason that I'm so passionate about this is because every single day, I have a founder come into my office and tell a pitch and tell something wrong. So this is something that really is something that is a lot of mistakes are made, basically. We're going to look at a few of those. The first one, which drives me crazy, you have competition. And I know it's cliched, and I know that everyone says that they don't say this, but this actually happens a lot. And frankly, every single startup in the world, every founder in the audience today, I guarantee you that there is at least half a dozen teams trying to do exactly the same thing as you, somewhere in the world, probably somewhere in Silicon Valley alone. So rule number one, you have competition. The second mistake is it's not about the competition. It's about the competitive advantage. And this is something that's really frequently misunderstood. I see a lot of startups saying that they're the biggest at the current point in time, the largest, whatever. They're not looking at the long-term dynamic, what's going to happen over time, and what they can do that the competition can't. And this is important for all layers of business. You guys know this guy. This is Jack Welch. If you don't have a competitive advantage, don't compete. So simple as that, and that's so true. That's very true when you're pitching a startup, and that's especially true when you're running a startup. So that's the second mistake. The third mistake is that startups usually overestimate how strong their competitive advantages are. And that's this guy. Buffett is really crazy about this. He talks about the economic moat. And his example is basically, if you are really good at something, what is going to stop copycats from getting as good as you at that in the long term? And it's really, the whole point is that this isn't a snapshot. It's that things are going to change, and that eventually your competitive advantages usually erode. So it's actually not about competitive advantage, it's about sustainable competitive advantage. So let's look at a couple examples here. This is a typical slide that I see in a pitch deck a few times a day. This is a startup traction, looks like it's going okay, little bit of exponentiating growth. The guy will usually pitch this, and I'll say, that's cool, that's great. And I'll have a closer look, and I'll see the competition is doing that. And that isn't as rosy of a picture, of course. When you're third place in a startup, you might as well be dead last. So this guy's not in that great a shape. But what's really important here is that neither one of these guys is really standing out and showing they have a huge moat that's keeping the other guy from competing. And both of them are really actually at risk for this. Which is probably the number one question that I like to ask. What would you do if Google comes into your marketplace tomorrow? And it's really about trying to find a way, having a sustainable competitive advantage is what prevents Google from doing this. And I know it's easier said than done. We'll get into that soon. Let's look at one more. That's this one. How's this? Is this a good picture, a bad picture? You're the blue guy? So I'd say this is a bad picture. And the reason for this is, yeah, you're the leader, you're doing great, but you've got these other guys nipping at your heels. They're potential copycats, exactly. And what's really scary here is there's just linear growth. And when you don't have a sustainable competitive advantage, that's what you end up with, linear growth. And that basically means you found yourself in a mature market. And when you're the incumbent startup and you're trying to charge into a new market, that's exactly where you don't want to be. And what happens then in a mature market is that even if you win, even if you are the leader like this blue guy, your margins erode. You have to basically undercut the competition, your prices go down, costs start to go up. And even if you have the most revenue, the most users, the most whatever, you're probably not making any money. So let's look, I just ruined it. Let's look at a few of these here. This is just a bunch of potential competitive advantages that a startup can have. A lot of the most common ones that you think about. Now the big question is, how many of these are actually sustainable? These ones, top 4. And these are really, really powerful things like network effects. That's why there's only really going to be one Facebook. Brand is just so hard to disrupt once a company has a great brand like Apple, things like that. The more interesting side, though, is what's not sustainable. And this is the third biggest mistake that I always see in pitches, is a startup founder will come to me, and they'll say, oh yeah, listen, we've got the absolutely best application for this. The user experience is 10 times better than anyone else. And quite often they'll show it to me, and I think they're right. I think that's great, but so what? And the real problem is, let's take an example. On the left-hand side here, we have Puzzles and Dragons. Breakout gaming hit in Japan. It didn't exist a year and a half ago. The company is now bigger than Nintendo. And they've just got this really innovative game. This is their only game, really. Huge hit, and it's a lot of fun, really innovative stuff, this puzzle RPG type game. I play it myself, and I think it's really cool. But on the right-hand side, we have Puzzle Trooper. And this came out about 3 months after Puzzles and Dragons really hit it big. And now the market is just flooding with people just like this. Gaming is a perfect example of it being really difficult to get that moat. You can ask Zynga, because they had some really innovative products as well. And then they saw the same thing. It was really hard to differentiate. Tons and tons of competitors commoditizing the products. Eventually, it leads them to a really tough economic climate. And it's not just games. Another great one here, diapers.com. Has anyone heard of this? This is the company that actually wanted to be the Amazon of diapers, essentially. And they have online sales for diapers. They started building a great brand. Everything was going really well until Amazon realized they were trying to be the Amazon for diapers. As soon as they started becoming successful, they got on Amazon's radar. They started to understand the business model, and these guys realized that Amazon was undercutting their prices, and they actually had a robot that would sell things at a cheaper price than no matter what diapers.com set their prices to. These guys raised about 70 million US dollars. So they thought they had a pretty good moat. You saw one of those unsustainable advantages was more capital. These guys had 70 million. Amazon, it leaked out later, their intention was to lose $100 million in the first quarter just to push these guys out of business in a single quarter. So this is why I think a lot of these are very unsustainable. Problem though, it's great to get these ones on the left-hand side, the yellow guys. But it is really, really hard to do. And I know you're going to say, oh, Ryan, this is great. Yeah, I want to be the next Facebook, but I've got to become the next Facebook first. I want to have this great brand. I want to be huge. But yeah, it's very hard to do. And the question is, how can you do that? And I think this is where the guys on the right-hand side come in. You probably have some of those now as a startup. Whether you have a better product. I see a lot of guys with genuinely better products in the world, things like that. And those are not necessarily bad. They're just not going to last forever. So I think the real secret is to sort of bridge with those unsustainable competitive advantages. And I like the rocket booster analogy. You can use those ones you have now to try and boost something into something sustainable in the future. The only thing is you have to make sure that that final stage, this yellow guy, is actually a big part of your business plan going forward. The cool thing is all the really successful startups have actually made this part of their business plan. Instagram is my favorite example of this. Instagram, as you know, is one of the first companies to actually list out photo filters and actually using filters for taking better photos. And most of the people I know that started using Instagram in the early days were using it for the photo filters. I suspect they realized that that wouldn't be sustainable in the long term, so they built a social network around it. Then they have those network effects, and they have that lock-in, and that's why they became a billion-dollar company. Since then, there have been a flood of companies trying to build better photo filters, and lots of them have succeeded. Instagram is no longer the best at doing these filters, but it's still the only billion-dollar photo sharing app because they have those network effects. And really, it happens everywhere. You can look at all sorts of different examples. I will say that every single company in the MA Capital portfolio has very carefully mapped out a two-step strategy just like this. So really, that's kind of all I wanted to speak with you about today. I really hope you guys came away with sort of a framework for thinking strategically about how you're going to competitively position your company going forward.